and the long table. Welcome to It's the Economy. The employment data released as part of the RBI's KLEMS data, the tables are a bit surprising. As per this data, 42 million jobs were created in FY20 and 31 million jobs in FY21. Remember, both these were peak COVID years. And if you compare it, in the earlier 6 years, that is from FY13 to FY18, when GDP was growing well at about average 7%, the average rise in employment per year is only 500,000 jobs. So 500,000 jobs when you're at 7% and 40 million jobs when you're in COVID. That's surprising. Again, in the latest year, FY24, the year that just ended, 46 million more employment opportunities were created. Now, FY24 was a good GDP year, 8.2%. But private final consumption grew very badly at only 4%. Now, again, this doesn't tie in if so many jobs, 4.6 crore jobs were created. To get a handle on why the employment numbers are not in sync with GDP growth, I have with me Professor Amit Basole of the Azim Premji Institute. Amit specializes in employment studies. Amit, thank you very much for sparing time for us. So, I'll try and request the team to run those numbers. If you looked at the annual rise from FY13 to FY18, 6 years, totally we are creating only about 2 million jobs. And then you come to FY20 and 21, we are creating 30 million and 40 million jobs each year. When, GDP was contracting. Why is this so much not gelling growth and employment?
Right. So I think to understand this, we need to understand what kind of employment has been generated in recent times. And this is something that has been covered in the previous year or so. There's a debate on this, that a lot of the additional employment we have seen has come in the form of self-employment, own account work, tiny mom and pop kind of enterprises, or unpaid family helpers. And a lot of it is driven by women's workforce participation rate rising, which had been falling earlier. Your viewers may know that between 2004 and about 17 or so, there was a decline in women's participation rate, and then there has been a rise in it. So that kind of both accounts for the weak employment growth before and the strong employment growth subsequently.
Okay. Actually, we'll try and pull out that data also. On own account work, we have actually seen the number of people employed rising from about 21% of the total employment to 30% of total employment in 6 years, as you point out. Again, unpaid work, if we can pull that data, total percentage was 27.9 in FY18, and it rises to 33% by the time we come to 22-23. Now, unpaid work obviously is unfortunate, but is it possible that this own account work, formal employment is not rising, but there are more gig workers, people supplying for the Zomatos, Swiggies, or, urban company, people come and clean up houses now. Maybe these are jobs which are giving employment to people who otherwise would have been jobless. To that extent, it's positive?
So some part of it could be the kind of gig work that you're referring to, but we also know that a large part of this additional employment actually has happened in things like agriculture and petty retail and so on. So these are the clearest, surplus labor sectors of the economy where people work if they can't find work anywhere else. So they are sort of falling back into these sectors. I think that is the major story here, that some sort of a process which may include distress, incomes jobs not being available elsewhere, has forced people first back into agriculture, but also back into self-employment, etc. And those are the additional jobs that we're really seeing here.
Okay. Well, I take your point on that, but once again, let us pull up the annual numbers from FY13 to FY23. Those numbers will come up for our viewers. You see a similar change from around FY19, 17 million jobs, FY20, 41 million jobs, 41.8 million, 22 is 31 million. It's a seminal jump as we come towards FY18 onwards. Maybe this is e-commerce picking up. and therefore additional. I take your point that unpaid work also is high. So that must be people going back to rural areas after COVID and settling for, family farms or something. But what about this number, overall number increasing so much? Do you think that's a positive?
I'm afraid I don't think so. And in fact, the KLEMS data itself gives you a clue on this. If you look at the labor productivity numbers from KLEMS, you see a fall in labor productivity at the same time that the rise in employment starts happening around the year 18, 19, 1920s,
Yes,
when we start
yes.
seeing this rise in employment. That's when you see a fall in labor productivity in agriculture. You see a fall in labor productivity in trade. These are again those sectors where the crowding in of people is happening, right? So those additional employment is not a result of growth happening. In fact, people are sharing in the same amount of output, if you will, right? Labor productivity is dividing output by employment. And if
Yes.
output doesn't grow as fast as employment grows, the labor productivity falls. And that's what we have seen in these recent years.
No, that point is taken. As we can see, even in FY24, 4.6 crore jobs, 46 million jobs created. Of course, it's a good GDP number, but this is a large number, highest ever single number that we have seen. Now, this is also not gelling with consumption. Like I said in the introduction, GDP, if you divide it between consumption and capital goods, in the year that was, it was capex which pushed GDP up, not consumption. So is that also something that gives away that the job quality is not good?
I think so. And, this is also consistent with another number which came out recently, which is the ASUS, the Annual Survey of Unorganized Sector Enterprises. If you look at that data also, you'll see that the GVA per worker in the unorganized sector in real terms actually has declined. So we know that these multiple shocks that have happened over the last few years have affected the unorganized sector badly, and that comes up in these productivity numbers. So all of this, I think, is consistent with each other. That things are not going so well for one part of the economy. People are forced to work in some capacity because they can't remain unemployed, and that transition for women particularly, from out of the workforce to into the workforce, doing some kind of employment, shows up as a very big uptick in employment, but that's not the kind of full-time, regular, productive jobs, if you will, that we really want to see generated.
Okay, that's unfortunate. As you point out, productivity, and there was this excellent report from India Ratings also a day before yesterday, which pointed out that unorganized sector, exactly the as-used data that you point out, took away some 4.3% of GDP from the unorganized sector. But Amit, we are having a budget ahead of us, and already the PMAY, PM Awas Yojana, the government has promised will be expanded, 3 crore more houses. What would a good recipe be to improve labor productivity?
Yeah, I think this is really the main question. And I think, we have to think seriously about an employment policy, at the national level, which kind of coordinates a lot of different things we know need to be done for the labor market. That could include things like skilling, which the government has already been paying a lot of attention to. But even more importantly, I think scale up of the, MSMEs. MSME sector, we know, has not been doing very well. And that's where a lot of the jobs come from. So it is constrained still, we know, by lack of infrastructure, by regulations, many other things going on. That these are not new issues, but we need a comprehensive framework that says, okay, we are going to take the employment issue seriously. It is not solved. The creation of work that we have seen or employment is not the kind we need. So how do we encourage firms to pick up their hiring? To offer this kind of regular wage work, and firms will only hire if they see a promising environment out there in terms of demand, and sales and so forth. So that is really comes back to a macro question of, are we creating the environment where businesses feels like they want to invest, they want to create those jobs?
Okay, what is that environment? If you give subsidies, if you employ more, you may end up just, bloated numbers. How is the government to tackle it? There are some people who argue that state governments giving 200 units of power free may actually be good because more children will study, more small units will be able to afford because they're not paying for at least some part of their power. Which is the way to go?
Yeah, and here, the fiscal constraint comes up, obviously, when you mention the free power, that a lot of the things that we want governments to do, both at central and state level, are not free things. If you want the government to give subsidies to firms, That's going to cost money. Power is going to cost money. Roads and basic infrastructure is going to cost money. Some of which, of course, this government has been very committed. The capital expenditure part, I don't think anybody can fault, on what has been going on. But somehow that is not translating into a private sentiment to invest. And that's really where I also don't have, the answers to this. But I think until we turn the corner on private investment, and particularly not in the corporate only, but in the non-corporate sector and the MSME sector, until we turn the corner and we get investment, we're really not going to get out of this hole.
Okay, these are hard questions, of course, for economists and policymakers, and we will do that in off-market hours. Thank you very much, Amit Basole, for bringing a very important point. Yes, employment numbers are rising, but labor productivity, according to the same sets of tables, is showing a steep fall, is showing a consistent fall since FY18. So we are creating more gig workers, but we're also pushing back maybe more people into farm labor, which is perhaps not as productive. The numbers are a bit troubling, no doubt about it. We have to wrap up on Bazaar on that slightly somber note, but none of these is affecting markets. At the moment, markets continuing with that slight red tick. Chartbusters will take the action forward.